Le webinaire va bientôt commencer. Veuillez rester en ligne. La diffusion vient de démarrer. Tous les participants sont en mode écoute seule.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sahela Phillips, and I'm the Networks and Training Manager here at the Chartered Institute of Linguists. I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar on light, standard, and full post-editing of machine translations, how to adapt to the AI-driven industries in the industry, presented by Rayna Damyanova. During this webinar, you can ask questions by posting them on the questions panel to the right of your screen. Then at the end of Rayna's presentation, we will have time for a Q&A session. There will also be 2 polls during the presentation, so please do participate in those. But for now, I'd like to welcome our speaker. Hi, Rayna. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Hello, everyone. Hello.
That's great. Hi. So I'm just going to pass over controls. So if you can just bear with me, and then we should be able to see your screen. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Please let me know. I hope you're seeing my screen now.
Yes. Yep, that's all fine. Okay, so I'm going to now leave you to start your presentation, Rayna.
Yeah. Okay. So first, thank you for attending today's webinar. It's a great privilege for me to be a panelist to a webinar held by the Chartered Institute and be among language practitioners from all over the world. We will have a Q&A session after the presentation, as Suhela said, so please let us know what you think. Today's topic is light, standard, and full post-editing on machine translations, how to adapt to the artificial intelligence-driven changes in the industry. As language professionals, you all know that the language industry is constantly evolving. However, machine translation and post-editing have become a hot topic in the last few years. And despite the fact that many linguists still greet these services with a certain level of distrust, the landscape of the translation industry is already changing. Usually, innovation and automation are driven by need, and machine translation is no different. According to a recent research by Common Sense Advisory, which surveyed more than 8,000 consumers in 29 countries, 65% of consumers prefer content in their own language, even if it's poor quality. 73% want product reviews in their language, 40% will not buy in other languages, and 66% use online machine translation. Thus said, businesses need to engage their global audience with a full language experience, which leads to the need of fast and cost-efficient solutions. Not to mention the exponential growth of internal data to be translated on a daily basis. This rapid shift to artificial intelligence and machine translation requires new skill sets and creates alternative roles for the language professionals in the translation and localization process. Today, we will briefly go through to the definitions of artificial intelligence and machine translation. Then we will discuss the most commonly used machine technologies and engines. We will go through the language professional's role in the whole process. We will discuss the layers of post-editing. We can compare some examples, and then we will focus on how to manage expectations, linguistic expectations and client ones. We hope that by the end of the webinar, you will have gained a better idea of the whole process and we can open some space for further discussions. There's a lot to talk about. However, before we proceed, we have prepared a quick poll to to gain a better idea of your perceptions towards post-editing of machine translation. So, Suhaila, can you please take care of the poll?
Sure. Okay. So you will now see the poll on your screen. And I will give you some time to select your answer. So the first question is, what is your perception towards post-editing of machine translation? So if you can select one of the following. So the results are coming in. I will give it 5 more seconds. Okay, so I'm closing the poll and let's see what the results are. So we've got 37% say positive. They already have experience with MTPE. We have 20% that cannot decide yet. We have 18% negative, already have experience with MTPE, and 16% positive but haven't done MTPE yet. And then lastly, just 10% negative but haven't done MTPE yet. Okay.
Okay, these are actually great results. To see so many of you already having had experience with machine translation post-editing and having a positive attitude is great. For those of you who cannot yet decide, it's actually quite good because now you have the chance to start gathering information and start building your knowledge and then experience on this topic. Regarding all of you who have negative experience because you have already worked on machine translation, I hope the webinar will be useful by showing you some let's not say tips, but showing you what we think can improve your experience. And according to us, it's not so much about technical knowledge, it's about first setting the expectations, because usually there is a large gap between client and linguistic ones. And those of you who have negative experience but you haven't done machine translation, let's start by showing the details, and then you can try and see if you can change your experience. Let's start. First, let's start with the basics. What is artificial intelligence? Oops, apologies. What is artificial intelligence? It is the ability of a computer program or a machine to think and learn. It is also a field of study which tries to make computers smart. It can be divided into 2 categories: general, or also called strong artificial intelligence. It mirrors human intelligence by providing opportunities for autonomous learning and problem solving. You can see this in sci-fi literature and movies, machines using intuitive learning, developing consciousness, etc. The second category is narrow artificial intelligence. It focuses on a single subset of cognitive abilities and advance in that spectrum. In simple words, it is applied to a specific scenario, such as self-driving cars, facial recognition, even your inbox's spam filters use narrow artificial intelligence, and, of course, machine translation. To define machine translation, we can use the definition from the European Association for Machine Translation. It is the application of computers to the task of translating texts from one natural language to another. On a basic level, machine translation performs simple substitution of words in one language for words in another. However, that alone cannot produce a good translation of a text, because recognition of whole phrases and their closest counterparts in the target language is needed. It's clear to everyone that not all words in one language have the equivalent in another, not to mention idioms, syntax, etc. Solving this problem with different techniques is a rapidly growing field, and it is leading to better translations, and more clients are now interested in the service. Let's have a brief look at these machine translation technologies. The rule-based machine translation technology is the so-called classical approach. It is machine translation system based on linguistic information about source and target languages, which is retrieved from dictionaries, grammars. It covers the main regularities of each language. Having input sentences in the source language, the rule-based machine translation system generates them to output sentences in the target language. This is done on the basis of morphological, syntactic, semantic analysis of both the source and the target languages. What are the benefits? It provides good out-of-domain quality. Adapting to new domains is not that hard, as the core grammar is the same across domains, and the domain-specific adjustment is limited to lexical selection adjustment only. Since customization is dictionary-based, it guarantees improved quality and compliance with the corporate terminology, which of course leads to predictable output and quality. As we said, the core grammar is the same across domains, which means we only need to set the proper rules beforehand. The performance is high, even on standard hardware. And since rules are usually written in a domain-independent manner, the vast majority of rules will work in every domain. If there are errors observed, they can easily be corrected, as the rules are handwritten. This leads to total control, and basically there is no quality ceiling. However, translation results may lack the fluency the readers expect, since rule-based machine translation systems are built with much less data than other machine translation systems, and by using dictionaries and language rules. As you know, language is constantly changing, and this means that rules must be managed and updated constantly. Rule-based machine translation is also hard to handle exceptions due to its nature. Everything must be made explicit. And in terms of investment, the customization cycle needed to reach the quality threshold can be long and expensive. There is an insufficient amount of really good dictionaries, and of course, building new dictionary is quite costly. Another machine translation technology is the statistical machine translation. It tries to generate translations using statistical methods based on bilingual text corpora. Where such corpora are available, good results can be achieved by translating similar texts. However, such corpora are still rare for many language pairs. To give you an example, usually it is considered that a minimum of 2 million words for a specific domain and even more for general language are required in order to consider it a good corpora. Theoretically, it is possible to reach the quality threshold, but most companies do not have such large amounts of existing multilingual texts to build the necessary translation models. It is easy to build, it is easy to maintain, as it uses statistics as opposed to manual insertion of rules in the rule-based machine translation technology. The translation is fluent, meaning it reads well, therefore meets user expectations. And it is good for catching exceptions to rules because it uses human data resources. However, the translation is neither predictable nor consistent. Training from good corpora is automated and cheaper than building dictionaries, but training on general language corpora, meaning text other than the specified domain, is poor. This means we need to have language corpora for each of the domains we want to use. Furthermore, Statistical machine translation requires significant hardware to build and manage the large translation models. It also has problems with morphology-rich languages, especially with translating into such languages. It doesn't know grammar that well and has problems with word order in different languages when it comes to subject, verb, object, and different variations of these. Generally, the more human translated documents available in a given language, the more likely it is that the translation will be of good quality. Newer approaches into statistical translation use minimum corpus size and instead focus on derivation of syntactic structure through pattern recognition. So this technology is still evolving. The neural machine translation, this is a deep learning-based approach. It has made rapid progress in recent years, and Google has announced its translation services are now using this technology in preference to its previous statistical methods. It requires only a fraction of the memory needed by statistical machine translation models. It uses an artificial neural network to predict the likelihood of a sequence of words. This is typically done by modeling entire sentences in a single integrated model. Each word in the input sentence is encoded as a number to be translated by the neural network into a resulting sequence of numbers to represent the translated target sentence. The parameters of this neural network are created and refined by training the network with millions of sentence pairs. Unlike other translation systems, all pairs of the neural translation model are trained jointly to maximize the translation performance. In other words, the key benefit to the approach is that a single system can be trained directly on source and target text, no longer requiring the pipeline of specialized systems which are used in statistical machine translation. However, every little ambiguity must be incorporated into the software beforehand. Neural machine translation systems are dependent on the training data used to train the neural network, as the way of learning is to mimic the data it has been trained with. And then we have the hybrid machine translation technology. It uses multiple machine translation approaches within a single machine translation system. Generally, this hybrid machine translation system leverages the strengths of statistical and rule-based translation methodologies. Several machine translation organizations claim a hybrid approach that uses both rules and statistics. The approaches differ in a number of ways. One of them involves rules post-processed by statistics. Translations are performed using a rules-based engine. Then statistics are used in an attempt to adjust and correct the output. Another approach is to use statistics guided by rules. Rules are used to pre-process data in order to better guide the statistical engine. And more recently, with the advent of neural machine translation, a new version of hybrid machine translation is emerging. It combines the benefits of rules, statistical, and neural machine translation. The downside, especially of the last combined method, is the complexity. It makes the approach suitable only for specific use cases. However, knowing the ups and downs of the specific machine translation approach will help you know what to expect from the machine translation output, what errors to expect and what quality, and therefore how much time you will need to invest in post-editing. Let's briefly go through some of the most commonly used machine translation engines. DeepL, it is a neural machine translation service currently offering translations between 11 languages, which leads to 110 language pairs in total. It has a complex and powerful setup it is actually considered the most accurate machine translation solution for the languages that it supports, of course, with regards to accuracy, fluency, and interpretation of nuanced text. It takes advantage of user feedback, which is really great. It can learn and improve the quality. However, there is a limited amount of languages and quality depends on the language pairs. Then Google Neural Machine Translation. It is still considered as the most robust machine translation tool. It covers more language pairs than any other machine translation solution. Actually, as of this month, as of October, the number of languages supported by Google Translate rose to 109. However, quality still depends on the language pairs. Microsoft Translator. It is using a hybrid approach, combining neural and statistical machine translation, and is widely considered on par with Google Translate with regards to the quality of the output. Some claim that for some languages it is even better. SDL, I suppose many of you know it, but SDL offers machine translation. Their tool is using neural technology and is a popular solution mainly among the users of other SDL products. Of course, there are many other machine translation engines, such as Moses, Systram, Kantan, etc. We should point that whatever the machine translation technology and engines are used, the language industry still seems to agree on the fact that machine translation can't yet reach the same level of quality as human translation. Therefore, it isn't ideal for content that resides in the public domain, which comes with potential legal implications, for example. Manufacturers are liable for the products they manufacture and associated content that they publish. In practice, this could mean that some commercial and certain types of internal technical documentation could potentially benefit from a machine translation-based workflow, usually in combination with post-editing, which poses the question of the language professional's role in the whole process, especially when it comes to post-editing. Let's give a definition of post-editing first. It has been increasingly researched and implemented by language service providers in recent years as a result of the productivity gains it can bring. Post-editing is performed on machine-translated output. This should be clear, of course, for the purpose of checking its accuracy and comprehensibility, improving the text, making it more readable, and of course, correcting errors. However, unlike translation, proofreading, and other standard services, it involves three texts: the source, the machine-translated output, and the final target text. And now, what is expected from the post-editor? Of course, post-editors should apply the same professional approach towards post-editing as for every other service they provide. It is expected that they should have a general knowledge of machine translation technology and a basic understanding of common errors that the machine translation systems make. They should also have a general understanding of how terminology management systems interact with machine translation systems. Of course, a general knowledge of computer-aided translation tools is needed. These three things can not only increase the linguist's productivity, but also make the work a lot more enjoyable. And most importantly, they can contribute to improvement of the machine translation system over time through provision of structured feedback on frequently recurring errors. One of the biggest linguistic concerns when it comes to post-editing of machine translation is quality. It is understandable, but they can actually help improve the quality by providing structured feedback. The post-edited text can be used to train the systems and improve much more quickly. Now that we know what is expected of a linguist in terms of knowledge and skills, what about the actual service of post-editing? Do we really know what is the quality expected, when to apply light, full, or any other type of post-editing? Before we proceed, I would like to have another poll and would like to ask you what is the most common type of post-editing your clients request.
Okay.
And we can discuss further why I'm asking you this.
Okay, so what is the most common type of post-editing your clients request? Not clarified in job brief, light PE, full PE, or a mixture of the two? So I'll just give it another 5 seconds. And I am closing the poll. So the results show that 52% state that it's not clarified in the job brief. 27% say full PE. 14% state a mixture between light and full PE, and only 7% say light PE.
Oh, wow. 52% are not even clarified. To be honest, I didn't expect such a high number. This I expected high numbers, but not so high. Our experience shows that properly communicating client needs in terms of texts to linguists is one of the main challenges in machine translation and post-editing of machine translation. The whole process is still evolving and there are no clear definitions yet, and this leaves a lot of room for interpretation, therefore leads to a huge difference between client and linguistic expectations. We have had instances of linguists sharing their experience that they are asked to perform, for example, some sort of post-editing of a text, and then clients get back to them multiple times to add something on top of the initial post-editing, one thing, another, third. And in the end, linguists are not satisfied at all with the time invested, with the cost they received, and even the quality. This is why we are trying to set some norms and further discuss with linguists and clients the different types of post-editing, as these should be clearly communicated. As per usual guidelines, there are two types of post-editing, light and full. However, if we have a binary choice, it is too restrictive, not to mention variations of full post-editing, which you can find. We have mixtures between both, which are not, they are too vague. This is why, as I mentioned, we at Translate Plus, we have looked for a solution. And now we work with 3 levels of post-editing: light, standard, and full. This approach has proven to better outline client needs and not leave a gap between the light and full post-editing, which also facilitates the working process for language practitioners by clearly outlining the requirements. The light PE, as we see it, is the process of post-editing to obtain a merely comprehensible text without any attempt to produce a product comparable to a product obtained by human translation. The standard PE, on the other hand, involves a greater level of intervention to achieve a higher degree of quality. The expectation is that the outcome will be a text that is understandable and stylistically more appropriate. And then we have the full PE. The full PE is the process of post-editing to obtain a product comparable to a product obtained by human translation. you can see the difference. And if you had only light and full PE, there is a huge gap in between. Let's now discuss each of the layers in more detail. Light post editing. As we said, it implies minimal intervention by the post editor. It is expected that the post editor will focus only on an automated spell check and the machine translated content. The aim is to make the output more understandable overall. The average throughput of an editor when performing light post editing is around 6,000 words per hour. When do we use it? It is intended for translations for internal use, especially if the text is needed urgently or has a short lifespan or is simply needed for information purposes. Let's see what exactly is included. We have an automated spell check, only that. Then checking that all content has been translated, no source segments have been left in the source language, and an overall sanity check to remove any ambiguous or mistranslations within the time limit as best as possible. Nothing more. What is not included then? Terminology extraction and checks against existing or new terminology shouldn't be included and shouldn't be expected at all. No consistency checks with regards to key terminology or brand names, institutions, job titles, etc. And no major stylistic changes, no rewording, no changing of the syntax. That's it. Let's compare with the standard post editing. It involves a greater level of intervention to achieve a higher degree of quality. As we said, the expectation is that the outcome will be a text that is understandable, stylistically more appropriate. We expect that the post editor can post edit around 2,000 words per hour. It is used for translations, used for outbound purposes, but without 100% accuracy. Again, we have an automated spell check, but with a conjunction with a manual spot check to eliminate any objective errors, again, within the time limit as best as possible. Checking that all content has been translated. There is an overall sanity check of any mistranslations, consistency checks in regards to terminology. This includes product and brand names, names of institutions, and job titles. And some stylistic changes. The idea is to increase the readability of the text, remove the machine translation feel. What is not expected? Extraction of terminology. If clients want this service performed at the standard post-editing level, they should be charged individually for a separate service. And then we have full post-editing. Sometimes it is referred to as heavy post-editing. You will see it sometimes as full proofreading. The idea is to make the machine-translated text sound even more natural to the target audience and comparable to a product obtained by human translation. Usually, the average throughput of an editor is 1,500 words per hour. What is included? We have again the automatic spell check in conjunction with a thorough spot check regarding grammar, spelling, everything. Check that all content has been translated. Consistency checks. Again, there are more drastic stylistic changes in order to increase the readability. There are cross-checks related to a subject matter. The idea is to obtain the tone of voice and terminology. And there is terminology extraction for new glossaries. Everything included in full post editing. And here is a visual. I'm not sure if you will be able to see it very well, but you can clearly see how there are additional steps for each of the services. Furthermore, you will be able to reach the recording afterwards. You can have a look, print screen it, and use this visual. We hope it will help. Now, to better illustrate the post-editing layers, we have prepared some examples of a text. The text was translated from German into English. If you look at the text and the light post-editing applied, you can see that in a number of instances, the wording is not optimal. Further improvements of the text are not part of the scope of the light level of post-editing, as the meaning is comprehensible. So we have only a few changes. The mistranslation of transcreation and an incorrect expression, sales outlets, has been made. Then the punctuation for the speech and the closing quotation mark have been corrected. And that's it, nothing more. If you compare to standard post-editing, you can see further examples of improved grammar and wording in order to avoid phrasing that sounds unnatural in the target language. And then you can compare to full post-editing. There are a number of stylistic changes that concern wording and grammar, etc. Now, we have outlined the layers of post-editing. It's time to discuss expectations. Managing translation projects in the age of machine translation often means managing expectations from all sides: end clients, intermediaries, if any, and linguists, which is at times quite a difficult task given all the variables: the machine translation technology used, the quality of the source text, the quality of the output, time and effort invested by the linguist, the quality desired by the client, and of course, costs. To benefit the most from machine translation, the first thing to do is to recognize the types of texts it is appropriate for and acknowledge that in some cases its use may not be optimal. Once we have this sorted, the next thing to do is to ensure that we have a high quality machine translated output. However, we will focus on the scenario where you need to do only post-editing. Since in this scenario you do not have the power over the source text and the machine translated technology used, you cannot be certain of the machine translated output's quality. And this is one of the challenges that linguists face when working on post-editing. This is why there should always be post-editing guidelines between linguists, clients, and any intermediaries. The preparation of these guidelines depends on two main criteria. The first one is the expected output quality of the machine translation. The second is the client's quality expectations of the post-edited text. The output quality depends on the engine used, of course, and how well it has been trained. Actually, as we said, post-edited segments are ideal for retraining. So sometimes clients and linguists could consider investing more in post-editing initially, investing in terms of costs and time and efforts in order to improve the output quality and therefore save time and costs in the future. The quality expectation of the post-edited text depends on client preferences. Clients must always be clear about their preferences. Of course, as we know, this is not always the case. And here, post-editors and language service providers can become consultants by working with the client to form clear quality expectations. We should always take into consideration the following aspects: the language pairs that will be machine translated. We should always take into consideration the particularities of the language. Then we should consider the machine translation engine used and the type of information and its purpose in order to better assess the type of post-editing needed. Regardless if you work with private customers or LSPs, these aspects should be discussed for each project. And we have prepared a visual guide to better illustrate the workflow at Translate Plus and how we manage client expectations. We hope we can shed some light on what happens before the project reaches linguists. So whenever we receive the project, the first thing to do is to make assessment of the requirements. Here we can discuss the purpose of the text, take into consideration all the aspects we already mentioned, etc., etc. When all expectations with clients have been made, all discussions have been made, and we have come to an agreement, there is an analysis of terminology management from the master files. Then we can make quote, and we can provide the quote and do the machine translation. And then here comes the role of the post editor. We make sure to clearly communicate all details to linguists, starting with clients' names, their website, in order to, if we need standard or full post editing, linguists need to be aware of the tone of voice, etc., etc., need to receive reference materials and so on. But expectations should be made clear from the start. Then we leave room for any queries that might arise between clients, linguists, everyone. We run additional quality procedures. We perform an additional spell check. If everything is okay, translation is considered as completed and the machine translation memory is updated. As we discussed, the pros can be that we can easily and quickly translate big volumes. The turnaround times are shorter. We can process multiple languages very quickly, but quality implications should be communicated with clients. They should expect that there might be quality implications. At some instances, they do not have cost control on post editing if they are not certain of the post editing service and want to request another services later on down the process. And if they have expectations that weren't discussed in advance. And of course, the use of machine translated texts can have legal implications, and it should be discussed in advance every time. Now, as a summary, we could say that machine translations have their own characteristics, and having a general knowledge of how they work can help improve the quality. I think this is clear to everyone. The market's increased interest in machine translation and post-editing, it requires new skill sets, despite the fact that machine translation and post-editing is not yet standardized. The language industry is still defining the roles of each stakeholder even, and we can all contribute to set the norms and improve the way we work on these interesting new projects. Machine translation and post-editing of machine translation remain a controversial topic for many language professionals. There has been a rapid progress in recent years, but we still have a long way to go. Again, improvement can be achieved only by better communicating the needs of each of the parties involved in this process. And of course, communication should start with setting expectations on quality, on time, on skills, and on costs. Language professionals actually have the chance to help technological advance, and they can benefit from the opportunities it has to offer. There's a lot more to discuss, but I think we have set the direction. So it's time for you to ask your questions, and I will be happy to be able to answer some of those.
Thanks, Rayna.